Hey nerds, what's up? In case you missed it, Brandon Sanderson announced another secret project that is going to be released in 2025 along with the Words of Radiance leatherbounds. Now, during the year of Sanderson, I decided I wanted to remain mostly completely unspoiled as possible on those secret projects, so I never read preview chapters, I never knew the titles before going into them, but I'm feeling differently this time around. I feel like because the year of Sanderson's over and this isn't coming out for so long, I was pretty excited when he dropped 3 preview chapters and read them right away. And I was so glad I did because boy were those 3 chapters a doozy when it comes to Cosmere connections. So as we always do on this channel, I will be your guide to the overview of every Cosmere thing that was mentioned in these preview chapters. If you haven't read them yet, you can find them on his website or on his YouTube channel where he does a reading. It was also sent out in his newsletter. Now, before we jump into the individual Cosmere connections, I did want to bring up something that I noticed that I think is very important to touch on, and that's that Brandon in these preview chapters was explaining the Cosmere. I feel like there has been kind of a worry that as Brandon's books become more and more connected, that they will also become more and more inaccessible to new fans or as starting points. I have really not been of that opinion, and these 3 preview chapters prove to me more than ever that it's going to be okay. He gives you the context you need to know in all of these books. The best example I saw in this one was the word perpendicularity. That feels like a very big Cosmere word, but in here, I think this is like the clearest description of what that is we've ever gotten. It was just stated in a sentence. So I'm hoping this is going to assuage some people's main concerns, that it's going to become inaccessible. Like just from the 3 preview chapters I read, like I don't think it would have been that hard to figure out what things were being talked about. Okay, as an overview of what we learned about Secret Project number 5, we learned that the title is either going to be Isles of the Emberdark or just Emberdark. We learned that it was going to be a dual perspective novel with a flashback sequence. And we also know that those flashback sequences are actually just an already published novella called Sixth of the Dusk. So you could wait to read that as flashbacks in Secret Project 5 if you haven't read it, or if you're too excited to wait and you haven't read it, you can just go check it out now since it is released. Now, Brandon did say that he was going to change a couple of things in that novella to make it work as flashbacks, and that he would list what those changes were. So if you didn't want to reread the novella as you read Secret Project 5, you could still know what the changes were. Now, normally I do a timeline section in these videos of where we think any new project is going to sit in the chronological order of the Cosmere. In this case, it's pretty easy because in all of our chronological orders so far, we've pretty much always put Sixth of the Dusk as one of the very latest in the Cosmere. So the fact that Sixth of the Dusk in this book will be acting as a flashback sequence means that we can pretty safely say Secret Project 5 is very late stage Cosmere. It does seem that Brandon is favoring that recently, especially with the secret projects. It seems like pretty much everything is moving into late stage Cosmere at this point, but that's where that sits. Before we get into my 3 main sections, we have one more thing to cover, which is dragons. Everyone is so excited because one of our perspectives is a dragon perspective. Now, I know a lot of you are really new to the Sanderson fandom, so if you're new, the reason the fandom goes so crazy over dragons is that we were teased for years about dragons. We kept seeing dragons in name, but never got to actually see a physical dragon. We knew a character named Frost was a dragon, and we knew Cultivation, one of the shards, the vessels to the shard, was also a dragon, but we never saw them in their dragon form. The first dragon we actually got to just see physically in dragon form was Xysis from Trust of the Emerald Sea. So getting a dragon perspective is very exciting for us for that reason. Now, I could be wrong here, but I think we've already learned something new about dragons in the Cosmere. We knew, I think from an AMA, that they were born human, and we knew that they could transform. They had a human and a dragon aspect, but I don't think we knew that they needed to spend 30 years as a human before transforming into a dragon. So I thought that was a very interesting bit of information to have. So I'm excited to see what else we're going to learn about Cosmere dragons during this book. Okay, my first section I'm going to start with is people. So I'm going to go over all the people mentioned in this novel that you should know. So the first one we're going to start with is Frost, who I had just previously mentioned. Now, Frost is a character we met through the epigraphs in Words of Radiance, which are the little sentences before the chapters start in that book. And those epigraphs were a letter from Frost to Hoid. Now, Frost is one of our dragons of the Cosmere, and we know him as a non-interventionalist, which means that he does not want to intervene anymore in the Cosmere, which is why even though him and Hoid have a long-lasting relationship, they're at odds because Hoid is distinctly an interventionalist. We also know that Frost is the oldest character we have seen yet in the Cosmere, and we are also pretty sure that he communicates with the 17th Shard, and that's how he gets a lot of his information about what's going on in the Cosmere. In case you don't know, the 17th Shard is a group of world hoppers, most of whom we know from various novels in the Cosmere. You will see them crop up mostly in the Stormlight Archive. I believe I'm right in saying that. I think most of the instances I can think of them being named or showing up are in that series. Next up, we've got Dusk and Vathi. Now, Dusk is the main character in the novella Sixth of the Dusk. So if you're interested in knowing more about him now, you can just go read that novella because it's published. And then Vathi is also a character that we meet in that novella. Next up, Hoid. I realize I talk about Hoid as if everyone knows him, but I know a lot of people who watch my channel are new to the Cosmere. So if you don't know, Hoid is a character that shows up in all of Sanderson's books on every planet. He is kind of the Easter egg for fans to find and sniff out. He has a lot of aliases. I won't give them all up here. You can go try to find them. I think that's one of the funnest parts of the Cosmere. I love that little Easter egg. But Hoid is our second oldest character in the Cosmere, and he was present at the original shattering and at the creation of all the shards. We are unsure what Hoid's ultimate goal is. We don't necessarily know his agenda, but he is definitely an interventionalist and is seen throughout all the books really influencing things. Okay, Xysis, we just talked about him in the earlier section. He is a dragon that we meet in Tress of the Emerald Sea. We knew when we last saw him, he was at the bottom of the Crimson Sea doing research on spores. The Hordes, or the name Chrysalis, was mentioned. Now, the Hordes refer to the Sleepless, which is kind of a race that we've seen mostly through the Stormlight Archive. One also appeared in Yumi and the Nightmare Painter. Now, we don't know where the Sleepless are originally from, but they are an entity that is essentially made up of like thousands of little bug-like creatures, and they kind of act like a hive mind, but they do have individual mind capabilities because some of them can be sent off. Now, I do not think we have ever heard of this particular Sleepless Chrysalis. I don't think that's an alias of any of our known Sleepless, unless it's just a new alias we haven't heard of, but I think this is a new person we have not met before. Okay, next is Naz, and Naz is a character that has been traveling around a lot with Chris as like an assistant researcher. Now, Chris is one of our most prominent world hoppers that we know about. She is from the unpublished novel White Sand, or the published version, which was the graphic novels. And she is the author of all of like the arcanum you see at the back of books. She's the researcher. And also, I think a lot of the research, like end papers that appear in the Stormlight Archive. And those, I think, actually have notes from Naz, our character, to Chris. So he's a researcher. He is collecting things. We also see Naz briefly in Bands of Mourning, but I feel like most of our knowledge of Naz just like comes from the little notes we see him make to Chris. So we've known that Naz is from Threnody, which is the planet from the novella Shadows for Silence in the Forest of Hell. But I'm pretty sure the last time we saw Naz, he definitely wasn't dead. Pretty sure he was still alive. And we know people from Threnody turn into shades, but he seems so different than the shades that are found in Shadows for Silence in the Forest of Hell, like much more cognitive. Like, I know it's a type of cognitive shadow, so maybe he's like a different type of cognitive shadow and they're just calling it a shade because he's from Threnody. But yeah, he seems a lot more with it. So I'm wondering if something has developed on that front. although it's also mentioned that he makes people uncomfortable, so maybe there is still some danger there. Lots of questions. I am thinking, because of the way his hairstyle and clothing is described, that he must die sometime in, shortly after we saw him in Bands of Mourning, like Era 2, Mistborn. Did he die in that book? And I just literally don't remember. I don't think he did, but like the big sideburns and the suit sounds like Mistborn Era 2. So that's my thing. If I'm being an idiot, let me know, but I think he died sometime between we last saw him, but close to when we last saw him. Okay, next up we're going to discuss places. So the first one is Yolen. Now, Yolen has been coming up a lot, so I feel like perhaps if you weren't familiar before, you're becoming more familiar. So Yolen is the planet where the original shattering of Adonalagium happened. Butchered it again. It's fine. The original shattering happened. We just don't even need to bring the shard name into it. Again, if you're new, you have probably seen shards. Like, for example, in Mistborn, preservation and ruin are considered shards. So that's where the original shattering came from, and all of the original vessels for those shards also came from Yolen. There's 3 races from Yolen: humans, dragons, and Shodel. And I think we get a glimpse of the Shodel at the end of Yumi and the Nightmare Painter, and probably one more book that I'm just not remembering. Oh, we also know that Hoid, Frost, and Xysis also originally came from Yolen. So next, let's talk about Shadesmar and Silverlight. So we talk a lot about Shadesmar. It is kind of our term that we use for the cognitive realm, and we see it the most in the Stormlight Archive. Now, the cognitive realm is the realm of thought, which you guys probably could have guessed by the name. And in the Cosmere, we consider there to be 3 realms, which is the physical realm, the cognitive realm, and the spiritual realm. The physical realm is where most of our books take place. The cognitive realm is when we have those Shadesmar stories. The spiritual realm, which is not a place you can inhabit physically like the cognitive realm or the physical realm, but is the place where all the souls of objects and people and things are. It's important to note that the cognitive realm, or Shadesmar, is also where the perpendicularities are, so how you can travel between planets more easily. So in connection to that, Silverlight, which is mentioned here, is one of our prominent cities in Shadesmar, and it is a city that is known to house a lot of world hoppers and Cosmere-aware people, although I think pretty much everyone's Cosmere-aware at this late stage in the Cosmere, but whatever. Next, Daughtry is mentioned. Now, Daughtry is I think the home planet to Aether, or at least it's a planet with Aether. We saw Aether mostly in Tress of the Emerald Sea with the spores, but we know Lumar is not the home planet or where Aether originates. We also saw Aether in The Lost Metal with a character that uses them there. Right now, I don't think we know a lot about this planet, but I was super interested to hear that there used to be a perpendicularity there, and now there isn't. Like, was it destroyed? And how hard it is to travel there because there is no perpendicularity, and obviously space travel is a lot harder. I thought that was very interesting, and I hope we get to learn more in the book. Next, we hear mention of Scadrians. So Scadrians are people from the planet Scadrial, which is the planet that the Mistborn series takes place on. Now, we've known for a while that Scadrians were probably one of the first into space travel, to really travel, one of the more advanced in society. So we have been seeing the Scadrians pop up a lot in other series on other planets, especially in late stage Cosmere. I think it's been very interesting that I feel like more seeing them in adversarial roles, like they're expanding and not necessarily maybe acting in the best interest for the Cosmere, or at least acting in the best interest for Scadrial, which I think is a plot point that's interesting in light of how things are developing with Thadakar, which is a character from the Stormlight Archive. So our last section is magic and technology, and I'm going to start off this section with the bracers on Starling's arms. I'm really curious about those. Obviously, when she called them bracers and they're metal, it feels very Scadrian in nature. The magic system from Mistborn seems like Allomancy or Feruchemy or whatever. My mind immediately went to aluminum, which has shown again and again in different systems to be a limiting power, right? A leeching power. So I wonder if that is what is stopping her from transforming into a dragon. It could also technically be silver, which also has that kind of property, but it seems that silver is a lot more destructive. So I feel like if she was on, like, if they were silver, like maybe she'd never get to transform into a dragon again or something. It seems like this is more mild, so I would guess aluminum. That's my theory. So Aethers and a bonded symbiote. We got to see an Aether bound a little bit in the Lost Metal, but I'm really excited to learn more about them because I thought the magic was very cool. But we already talked about Aether in the other section, so I'm gonna leave it at that. There was also this description on how the ships worked, which I thought was really cool. I think a lot of discussion boards have been about space travel and like what the magic is going to look like in space travel. So I wrote down like the 4 things that were said in this chapter. And it said they used a Rosharian anti-grav tech. Roshar is the planet the Stormlight Archive takes place on. So anti-grav tech probably being a Fabrial. Then it said a Dahatrian Aethers, the Sephir Aether. So we talked about Aethers. Again, we don't really have a book or system yet that is focused on that, but we have seen Aether in Trust at the Emerald Sea and a little bit in Lost Metal. And then Scadrian composite metal hull. Scadrian would mean the Mistborn magic system. And then Awakened Metal Mind. So an Awakened Metal Mind is using Nalthis tech, which is the magic from Warbreaker, combined with Scadrian, the Mistborn magic, to have an Awakened Metal Mind. She said she doesn't trust them anyway. Yeah, I also wouldn't trust an Awakened Metal Mind, so love to hear that. Anyway, I thought it was cool that we've been theorizing a lot about that, and Sanderson kind of listed out there some of the different things that go in to the ship to make it travel. I guess not really space travel because they're traveling in Shadesmar, so I misspoke. But I liked seeing that little moment. It's all coming together. Okay, what are my overall thoughts on the chapters? I'm quite interested actually in the storyline about the Scadrian oppressors. I feel like Sanderson has been lightly touching on that in a bunch of different books, but never really making it the focus. So I'm really curious how that's going to play out, and I think it's a very interesting story beat, so I am looking forward to that. I know that there is a lot of worry that as we continue on, that like the Cosmere is going to overshadow Sanderson's work and make them less accessible, and for reasons I stated previously, I'm not really worried about that aspect of it. I will say, I think for me more the worry is, does a book become only interesting because of its Cosmere connections and not its main story? I think that is why personally the Sunlit Man didn't work a ton for me. Like, I didn't dislike it, but I also didn't love it, is because I thought the most interesting part of that story was the Cosmere connections, and that the story on its own didn't really like interest me that much. Whereas Tress and Yumi stood on their own completely, even without their Cosmere connections. I loved them anyway. So for me, it's just like, I really hope that this story is still great, and I love it, because if I love a story and then it also has a ton of Cosmere connections, it's just amazing. But like, if not, then it doesn't usually work for me as well, because it's kind of just like a way to get Cosmere info and not really like a story that I'm enjoying. And I think that matters. For example, my dad read all the secret projects and hasn't read Stormlight, so he read The Sunlit Man, and everyone was like, how is that possible? And I just talked to my dad. I was like, so what did you think about like that scene when that guy Kaladin showed up? And he's like, oh, well, it was like just obviously the main character's old commander. Like, people get context clues. I mean, people read Malazan just fine, and like, it doesn't explain anything. So I think people are overestimating, like, you can read this book and it's fine if you don't understand all of the words or the magic that is mentioned. Like, if you don't know anything, like, that's how it feels to read Gardens of the Moon, and I still really enjoyed it. Like, it's okay if there's stuff that's not explained. I don't think that's what makes it inaccessible. I think what makes it inaccessible is if maybe the story doesn't stand alone on its own. But anyway, that's all to say. We're seeing some lesser known characters here, and I'm pretty excited. I think the preview chapters were really good. Like, I was very excited about it, so I'm really looking forward to it. That's all I have for you today. Tell me if there's things I missed that you noticed or theories you want to talk about. I think I saw a theory that the captain of the ship is Captain Crow. I think that's a great theory since we know it's Sicius' ship. I got off a plane a couple hours ago. I left for the weekend, which is why usually I try to get these Cosmere videos up much sooner than this. But yeah, I was traveling all weekend, got off the plane a couple hours ago, and I'm sick, which is why I just am so low energy and I just kept forgetting my words. I feel like half my Cosmere videos I'm delusional in or sick in. Like, somehow it just always happens. Like, I can think of 2 or 3 other videos where I'm like sick. So I'm sorry. I don't know why that always happens. Maybe because he just drops stuff so frequently. And it's like my body only wants to film videos apparently on my very carefully curated schedule. I don't know. So I'm sorry if this video was a little scattered. I just, you know what? Cosmere waits for no one. If you like Cosmere Connection videos, please like and subscribe. That is the best way to support me. If you want to see other nerdy rants or what I'm currently reading, you can join me on Instagram at bookborn.reviews. This outro was weird. I'm gonna go take medicine and go to sleep. How's that for an exit? Tell me more about the Cosmere in the comments. See you next time. Bye.